The Chicago underworld has rules written in blood, but Sienna Moretti, the volatile daughter of the city's most ruthless don, broke every single one of them. She was a hurricane in high heels, leaving a trail of fired bodyguards and shattered glass wherever she went. Men who killed for a living were terrified of her temper. Then came Casey Rhodes, a waitress with $0 in her bank account and nothing left to lose. When the Mafia princess pushed, Casey didn't bow. She pushed back. This is the story of how a nobody tamed the beast, stole the enforcer's heart, and survived the impossible. The sound of a $3,000 bottle of Dom Perignon shattering against a marble pillar isn't something you ignore. For the patrons of the Sapphire, Chicago's most exclusive supper club, it was the signal to stop talking and look down at their plates. For Casey Rhodes, it was just Tuesday. "I said I want the car brought around now, you incompetent gorilla." The shriek cut through the ambient jazz like a serrated knife. Casey sighed, adjusting the apron that was digging into her waist. She was 24, tired, and exactly 3 days away from eviction from her shoebox apartment in Cicero. She balanced a tray of martinis, her eyes flicking toward the VIP mezzanine. Sienna Moretti was on a rampage again. The 22-year-old heiress to the Moretti crime family was standing on a velvet banquette, her face flushed with vodka and rage. She looked like a fallen angel, black hair cascading down a designer silk dress, diamonds glittering at her throat. But her eyes were pure demonic fire. 2 bodyguards, massive men with necks the size of tree trunks, stood helplessly by. One of them, a guy named Rocco, who Casey knew tipped well, was nursing a bleeding scratch on his cheek. "Miss Sienna, please," Rocco pleaded, his voice a low rumble. "Your father said—" "I don't care what Daddy said." Sienna grabbed a heavy crystal ashtray. "I am leaving. If you don't move, I will open up your skull." The music stopped. The entire restaurant held its breath. This was the daughter of Salvatore Moretti. If she killed a waiter, the waiter's family would probably have to apologize to her. Casey looked at her table, 2 terrified tourists from Iowa, and then at the mezzanine. She needed this shift. She needed the tips, and she couldn't serve drinks in a war zone. Something inside Casey, a dormant steel forged in the foster care system of South Chicago, snapped. She set her tray down on an empty service station. She didn't run. She walked. She walked with the heavy, stomping gait of a woman who had worked a double shift on 4 hours of sleep. She marched up the curved staircase, bypassing the VIP-only rope. Rocco saw her coming. His eyes widened. "Casey, no. Get back downstairs." Sienna spun around, the heavy crystal ashtray raised high. She looked at Casey with the disdain a lioness might show a gnat. "Who the hell are you? Get me another drink or get out of my face." "Put it down," Casey said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was flat. Dead calm. Sienna blinked, genuinely confused. "Excuse me?" "The ashtray. Put it down. You're scaring the customers and you're costing me tips." The silence in the room was deafening. Rocco took a step back, looking as if he expected a sniper bullet to come through the window. No one spoke to Sienna Moretti like that. No one. Sienna laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Do you know who I am, you little rat? I could have you killed before you hit the floor. And I could spill this pitcher of ice water on that dress," Casey said, grabbing the silver pitcher from a nearby table. "That's vintage Versace, right? Silk doesn't like water. It stains, ruined forever." Sienna froze. The threat of violence she was used to. The threat of fashion disaster. That was new. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." Casey took a step closer, invading the personal space that grown hitmen feared to enter. "You're acting like a toddler. You want to go? Go. Walk out the front door. But stop throwing things. It's tacky. And you're supposed to be royalty, right? Act like it." For 10 seconds, the air crackled with electricity. Sienna's knuckles turned white on the ashtray. She stared into Casey's eyes, searching for fear. She found exhaustion, annoyance, and a strange, cold pity. Sienna's lip curled. She slowly lowered her arm. Then, with a sneer, she dropped the heavy crystal onto the carpet with a dull thud. "You're boring me," Sienna spat. She stepped down from the banquette, shoving past Casey, her shoulder checking the waitress hard enough to bruise. "Rocco, the car!" Sienna stormed out, her entourage scrambling to follow. Casey stood alone on the mezzanine. Her hands started to shake, the adrenaline dumping out of her system all at once. She looked at Rocco, who was staring at her with his mouth slightly open. "You have a death wish, kid?" Rocco whispered, before he ran after his charge. Casey didn't answer. She picked up the ashtray, wiped the table, and went back to the bar. 10 minutes later, the manager, a sweaty man named Mr. Henderson, tapped her on the shoulder. He looked pale. "Casey," he squeaked, there's a man in the back office. He wants to see you." "Am I fired?" Casey asked, untying her apron. "I don't know," Henderson whispered. "It's Dante Vesperi." Casey's stomach dropped through the floor. She knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Dante Vesperi was Salvatore Moretti's underboss, the enforcer, the reaper. If Sienna was the hurricane, Dante was the silence after the storm. Casey walked to the office, her legs feeling like lead. She opened the door. Sitting behind the manager's desk, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Casey would earn in a decade, was Dante. He was terrifyingly handsome, dark eyes, sharp jawline, and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He was cleaning a speck of dust from his cufflink. He looked up. His eyes were cold, assessing, and predatory. "Sit down, Miss Rhodes," Dante said. His voice was like velvet over gravel. Casey sat. "Look, I'm sorry about the scene. I just—" "Shut up," Dante said gently. He placed a tablet on the desk. It was playing the security footage from the mezzanine. He tapped the screen, pausing it at the exact moment Casey threatened to ruin the Versace dress. Dante studied the image, then looked back at her. "My men can't handle her. Her father can't handle her. Psychologists run away weeping." He leaned forward. "How much do you make a year, Miss Rhodes?" $22,000. Before taxes, Casey stammered, caught off guard. Dante pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket. He uncapped a fountain pen. "Pack a bag. You're done waiting tables." The ride to the Moretti estate in Lake Forest was silent. Casey sat in the back of a black SUV that smelled of expensive leather and gun oil. The windows were tinted so dark that the world outside was just a grey blur. She wasn't sure if she had been hired or kidnapped. Dante Vesperi sat across from her, scrolling through emails on his phone. He hadn't spoken since they left the Sapphire. Casey studied him surreptitiously. He was younger than the stories suggested, maybe 30 or 31, but he carried himself with the weight of a man twice his age. There was a lethal grace to him, a coiled tension that suggested he could snap her neck before she even blinked. "Stop staring," Dante said without looking up. Casey stiffened. "I'm not staring. I'm assessing my captor." Dante's lips quirked, a microscopic smile that vanished instantly. He finally looked up, locking eyes with her. "You aren't a captive, Casey. You're an employee. A very highly paid experiment." "You haven't told me what the job is," Casey countered, crossing her arms over her cheap polyester uniform. "You just wrote a check for $10,000 and told me to get in the car." "That was a signing bonus," Dante corrected. "The job is simple. You are to be Sienna's companion." "Babysitter," Casey translated. "Handler," Dante corrected again. "Sienna is troubled. Her mother passed away 5 years ago, in a manner that was, let's say, unfortunate. Since then, Sienna has been spiraling. Drugs, reckless driving, public outbursts. It's bad for business. It draws attention we don't want. And you think I can stop her? I'm a waitress, Mr. Vesperi, not a therapist. You're the first person in 2 years she didn't physically assault when challenged," Dante said. "You didn't bow to her. Sienna despises fear. She eats it. You showed her indifference." That intrigued her. The car slowed, turning through massive iron gates. The Moretti estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. High stone walls, cameras everywhere, and men with earpieces patrolling the grounds with Dobermans. "Here is the deal," Dante said as the car came to a halt in the circular driveway. "You live here. You go where she goes. You keep her out of the tabloids and out of jail. In return, you get $5,000 a week, room and board, and full protection." Casey's jaw nearly hit her chest. $5,000 Is that legal?" "We prefer the term off the books," Dante said, opening the door. "But there is a catch." Casey hesitated on the gravel driveway. There always is. Dante stepped close to her. He smelled of sandalwood and danger. He loomed over her, using his height to intimidate, his dark eyes boring into hers. "If you betray us," he said softly, his voice dropping an octave, "if you sell stories to the press, if you help her buy drugs, or if you try to run, I will find you, and I will make you regret ever being born. Do we understand each other?" A shiver raced down Casey's spine, not entirely from fear. "Crystal clear." They entered the house. The foyer was like a museum, marble floors, Renaissance art, a chandelier the size of a Buick. Standing at the top of the grand staircase was Salvatore Moretti. The Don was an older version of Sienna, but where she was fire, he was ice. He leaned on a cane, his face a roadmap of hard choices. "Is this the girl?" Salvatore asked, his voice rasping. "This is her," Dante said. Salvatore limped down the stairs. He circled Casey, inspecting her like a racehorse. "She looks thin, poor. Hungry dogs hunt best, Don Salvatore," Casey said, chin up. Salvatore stopped. He looked at Dante. "She has a mouth." "She does," Dante agreed. "Good," Salvatore grunted. "Sienna is in the pool house. She's breaking the furniture. Go introduce yourself." Casey looked from the Don to the enforcer. She took a deep breath, clutching her battered purse. "All right, but if she throws a lamp at me, I'm throwing it back." Dante watched her walk away toward the French doors leading to the garden. "She won't last a week," Salvatore muttered, lighting a cigar. "I don't know," Dante said, his gaze lingering on Casey's retreating figure. "I think she might surprise us. She didn't flinch when I threatened her." "Everyone flinches, Dante." Salvatore exhaled smoke. "Eventually." Casey navigated the manicured gardens, the sound of breaking wood guiding her to the pool house. She pushed open the glass doors. The pool house was a wreck. A lounge chair was floating in the water. A glass table was shattered. Sienna was sitting on the edge of the pool, smoking a cigarette, wearing a bikini that cost more than Casey's life savings. She held a bottle of tequila in one hand. Sienna looked up, her eyeliner smudged. She squinted. "You," Sienna said. "The waitress, the one with the water pitcher." "Casey," she corrected. She walked over, picked up a towel from the floor and tossed it at Sienna. "Cover up. You'll catch a cold." Sienna stared at the towel. Then she looked at Casey. A slow, malicious grin spread across her face. "Daddy hired you, didn't he? To be my new jailer?" "I'm not a jailer," Casey said, sitting on a dry lounge chair opposite her. "I'm the person who's going to make sure you don't end up dead in a gutter, so your father doesn't have to bury his only child." Sienna laughed, tossing the tequila bottle into the pool. It bobbed next to the chair. "You think you're tough? The last girl, Brenda? I broke her arm. She fell down the stairs." "I have excellent balance," Casey said dryly, "and I grew up in a group home in Southside with 6 boys. You breaking my arm would require you to put down the drink and actually try." Sienna stood up, her eyes narrowing. She stalked toward Casey. "You have no idea what you've walked into, Casey Rhodes. This isn't a job. It's a shark tank. And Dante? He's the biggest shark of them all. He'll chew you up and spit you out once he's bored." "I'm not interested in Dante," Casey lied. She was very interested in the man who had threatened to unmake her existence. "We'll see," Sienna whispered, leaning down so her face was inches from Casey's. "Welcome to the family. Try not to bleed on the carpet." Sienna turned and dove into the pool, cutting through the water like a knife. Casey watched her, feeling the weight of the mansion pressing down on her. She had secured the money. She had entered the lion's den. But as she looked at the reflection of the Howl Rouse in the glass, she saw Dante watching her from the balcony above. She realized then that Sienna wasn't the only danger here. Handling the brat was going to be the easy part. Surviving the chemistry brewing between her and the enforcer? That was the impossible task. The guest suite was nicer than any apartment Casey had ever rented. It had silk sheets, a balcony overlooking the expansive grounds, and a bathroom bigger than her old kitchen. But Casey couldn't sleep. The silence of the Moretti estate was heavy, pressing against her ears like water. It was 2 a.m. when the sound of a heavy engine purring to life shattered the quiet. Casey was out of bed in 3 seconds. She didn't bother changing out of the oversized t-shirt she slept in. She just grabbed a pair of jeans, pulled them on as she hopped toward the door, and shoved her feet into her combat boots. She knew that sound. It was the low, throaty rumble of a McLaren trying to be quiet. Sienna. Casey sprinted down the hallway, bypassing the main staircase and taking the servants' stairs 2 at a time. She burst out the side door just as the sleek, silver sports car was rolling down the driveway with its lights off. "Hey!" Casey shouted, sprinting across the gravel. The car didn't stop. If anything, it accelerated. Casey cursed. She looked around. The guards at the gate were probably bribed or distracted. Sienna had done this before. Casey spotted a black Ducati motorcycle parked near the garage, Dante's bike. She'd seen him polishing it earlier. The keys weren't in it, but Casey didn't need keys. Not with her background. She hot-wired the bike in under 30 seconds, the engine roaring to life with a scream that definitely woke the house. She tore down the driveway, the wind whipping her hair into a frenzy as she chased the taillights of the McLaren, disappearing into the dark forest roads of Lake Forest. She caught up to Sienna on the I-94, heading straight for downtown Chicago. Casey pulled up alongside the driver's side window, revving the engine and pointing firmly to the shoulder. Sienna looked over, her eyes wide behind designer sunglasses. She flipped Casey the bird and floored it. "Oh, you want to play?" Casey muttered, leaning into the handlebars. The chase ended at the Vault, an underground club in the meatpacking district that was technically closed for renovations, but apparently open for mob royalty. Sienna screeched to a halt in the alley, nearly hitting a dumpster. Casey parked the bike, kickstand down, and stormed over as Sienna climbed out of the car, looking immaculate in a shimmering red dress. "Go home, Nanny," Sienna sneered, stumbling slightly. She was already high on something. "Get back in the car, Sienna," Casey ordered, grabbing her arm. "Do you have a death wish? Your father. My father is a tyrant." Sienna yanked her arm away. "I just want to dance. 1 hour. Then I go back to the prison." Before Casey could drag her back, the back door of the club opened. A bouncer, a mountain of a man named Tiny, looked out. "Miss Moretti." Tiny nodded. "We weren't expecting you. Let me in, Tiny, and keep the stray dog out." She gestured to Casey. Sienna disappeared inside. Casey didn't hesitate. She ducked under Tiny's arm. "Hey!" Tiny grabbed her shoulder. Casey didn't think. She reacted. She dropped her weight, stomped on Tiny's instep, and drove her elbow backward into his solar plexus. The giant wheezed and doubled over. Casey slipped past him into the thumping bass of the club. Inside, it was chaos. Strobe lights, smoke, and bodies moving to a deafening rhythm. Casey scanned the VIP booths. She spotted the red dress immediately. Sienna was already pouring shots, laughing with a group of men who looked like they sold organs on the black market. Casey marched over, pushing through the crowd. But as she got closer, she noticed something. The men around Sienna weren't smiling with her. They were smiling at her. Predatory. One of them, a guy with a snake tattoo on his neck, was texting under the table. Casey's instincts, honed in the roughest foster homes and darker alleys of Chicago, screamed danger. She reached the booth just as the man with the snake tattoo slid a hand onto Sienna's thigh. "We're leaving," Casey announced, her voice cutting through the music. She grabbed Sienna's wrist. "Let go of me," Sienna shrieked. "Guys, get her off me." Snake Tattoo stood up. "You heard the lady. Let her go." "You don't want to do this," Casey said, her eyes scanning the room. 3 other men were closing in. This wasn't a party. It was a trap. "I think I do," Snake Tattoo grinned, revealing a gold tooth. He reached for his waistband. Casey moved. She grabbed a half-full bottle of Grey Goose from the table and smashed it across Snake Tattoo's face. He went down screaming, blood and vodka spraying everywhere. "Sienna, move!" Casey yelled. The other 3 men lunged. Casey kicked the table into the first one, knocking him backward. The second one, a heavy-set guy in a leather jacket, swung a fist. Casey ducked, weaving inside his guard, and delivered a palm strike to his nose, shattering cartilage. Sienna stood frozen, the high wearing off instantly in the face of raw violence. "Run!" Casey grabbed her hand, dragging her toward the kitchen exit. They burst into the kitchen, startling the cooks. But the back exit was blocked by 2 more men holding switchblades. "Well," Casey panted, looking around for a weapon. She grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from a drying rack. "This is going to hurt." The men lunged. Casey swung the skillet with terrifying precision, cracking the first man's wrist. But the second one tackled her, driving her into the stainless steel prep table. The knife slashed down. Casey caught his wrist, her muscles straining, the blade inches from her eye. "Sienna, get out!" Casey screamed. I can't!" Sienna was cowering in the corner. The man was stronger than Casey. The blade crept closer. Casey gritted her teeth, preparing to bite, to scratch, to do whatever it took. Bang! The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the tiled room. The man on top of her went limp, a dark hole appearing in his shoulder. Casey shoved him off and scrambled back. Standing in the doorway, smoking gun in hand, was Dante Vesperi. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like the angel of death. He wore a black trench coat over his pajamas, his face a mask of cold fury. Behind him were 6 Moretti soldiers. "Clear the room," Dante ordered calmly. His men swarmed the kitchen. Dante walked over to Casey. She was panting, her shirt torn, blood on her cheek that wasn't hers. She still held the cast-iron skillet. Dante looked at the skillet, then at the unconscious men on the floor. He holstered his gun. "You took the Ducati," he said. It wasn't a question. "You left the keys on the dresser," Casey lied, breathless. Dante reached out, his thumb wiping the smear of blood from her cheek. His touch was electric, burning her skin. "Get in the car," he said. "We have a lot to discuss." The drive back was different this time. Sienna was sobbing in the back of the SUV, sandwiched between 2 guards. Casey was in the front passenger seat. Dante was driving. He drove fast, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. They were Gallagher's. Dante broke the silence after 10 minutes. Irish mob. Low level, but ambitious. They knew she would be there. "Someone tipped them off," Casey said, staring out the window. "That guy with the snake tattoo? He was texting before I even got to the table." Dante glanced at her. "You noticed that?" "I notice everything. It keeps me alive." "So does cracking a skull with a frying pan," Dante muttered. When they arrived at the estate, Salvatore was waiting in the library. He didn't yell. He just looked at Sienna with profound disappointment until she ran to her room in tears. Then he turned to Casey and Dante. "Leave us," Salvatore told his guards. The heavy oak doors clicked shut. The library smelled of old paper and cigar smoke. Salvatore poured 2 glasses of scotch. He slid one across the desk to Dante, but his eyes were on Casey. "My son tells me you disabled 3 men, 2 with broken bones, 1 with a concussion, and you identified a setup before my security team did." "Your security team was busy watching the front door," Casey said, not touching the drink. "The Gallaghers came in the back." "Who are you?" Salvatore asked softly. "Because I ran your background check, Miss Rhodes. It says you are a waitress. You grew up in the system. No military record, no police academy. So where did a waitress learn to disarm a knife wielder? Casey felt the trap closing. She couldn't tell them the truth. Not yet. The truth would get her killed faster than the Gallaghers ever could. You grow up in the homes I did, Casey said, keeping her voice steady. You learn to fight or you become a victim. I had a foster brother who ran with a bad crew. He taught me how to box, how to spot a mark. A foster brother, Dante repeated, leaning against the mantel. He was watching her like a hawk. What was his name? Does it matter? He's dead, Casey said flatly. Overdose. Dante pushed off the mantel and walked toward her. He circled her, making Casey feel like prey. You handled yourself well tonight, Dante said, but you were reckless. You took my bike. You went in alone. If I had waited for your team, they would have dragged her into a van before you even got your shoes on, Casey shot back. I bought you time. She's right, Salvatore grunted. He took a sip of scotch. She saved Sienna. That is all that matters tonight. Salvatore opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of cash. He tossed it on the desk. Bonus. For the hazard pay. Casey looked at the money. It was more than she used to make in a year. I don't want your money, Mr. Moretti. I want better security on Sienna. If she gets out again, next time they won't try to kidnap her. They'll just shoot her. Salvatore raised an eyebrow. You are refusing money? I'm refusing a bribe. I'm doing the job you hired me for. Casey turned to leave. I'm going to bed, unless you need me to beat up anyone else tonight. She walked out without waiting for an answer. Dante watched the door close. He picked up the stack of cash and weighed it in his hand. She's lying, Dante said. About the foster brother, Salvatore asked. About everything, Dante said. Her fighting style isn't street brawling, Sal. It's Krav Maga. Efficient, brutal, military grade. And the way she hot-wired the bike, she bypassed a high-end electronic ignition. That's not something you learn from a junkie foster brother. Salvatore sighed, rubbing his temples. Is she a cop? No, Dante said immediately. She doesn't smell like a cop. She hates the law. I saw it in her eyes when the sirens passed us on the highway. She tensed up. Then who is she working for? I don't know, Dante said, walking to the window to look out at the guest house where Casey was staying. But I'm going to find out. Keep her close. Let her think we trust her. And Sienna? Sienna is terrified, Dante said. For the first time in her life, she realized her last name is a target, not a shield. She might actually listen to Casey now. The next morning, the dynamic in the house had shifted. When Casey walked into the breakfast room, Sienna was already there. She wasn't throwing plates. She was staring into a cup of black coffee, looking pale and small. Morning, Casey said, pouring herself a cup. Sienna looked up. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a bruised ego and lingering fear. My dad says you saved my life. I did, Casey said, buttering a piece of toast. Why? Sienna asked. I treated you like trash. Casey paused. She looked at the young woman. Under the makeup and the attitude, Sienna was just a lonely kid acting out for attention from a father who was too busy running an empire to be a dad. Because it was my job, Casey said, and because nobody deserves to be taken by the Gallaghers. Sienna shivered. They said they were going to send pieces of me to my dad. I know, Casey said softly, but they didn't. You're safe. Dante walked in then, wearing a crisp navy suit. He halted when he saw the two women talking civilly. The car is ready, Sienna, Dante said. You have the charity gala tonight. Salvatore expects you to be there, and on your best behavior. Sienna groaned, her head dropping to the table. The Foundation Gala. It's so boring. Do I have to? Yes, Dante said, and Casey is going with you. Casey looked up sharply. Me? I don't do galas. I don't have a dress. That has been rectified, Dante said. He snapped his fingers. A maid entered, carrying a garment bag. "Wear it," Dante ordered, "and bring your clutch." "My clutch?" "The one with the gun in it," Dante said, his eyes locking onto Casey's. "I'm issuing you a permit and a weapon. A Glock 43. Small, concealable. If anyone gets within 5 feet of her tonight, who isn't family, you put them down." Casey stared at him. He was arming her. He suspected her. She knew that much. He was testing her. If she handled the gun like a pro, he'd know she was trained. If she fumbled, she might be useless. It was a game of chess. "Fine," Casey said, standing up. "But if I'm carrying, I'm not wearing heels. I can't shoot straight in stilettos." Dante smirked. A genuine, dangerous smirk that made Casey's breath hitch. "Wear the boots," Dante said. "It suits you." The charity gala was held at the Field Museum. It was a sea of tuxedos, politicians, and mobsters pretending to be businessmen. Casey felt ridiculous in the emerald green silk gown Dante had selected. It hugged every curve, slit high up the thigh to allow for movement, and for access to the holster strapped to her leg. She wore her combat boots underneath, hidden by the long hem. Sienna was clinging to Casey's arm like a lifeline. The events of the previous night had shaken her deeply. "Just smile and wave," Casey whispered. "Don't drink too much." "I need a drink," Sienna hissed. "That's Marco Rossini over there. He hates my dad." Casey scanned the room. She saw Marco Rossini, a heavy-set man with a scar running through his eyebrow. He was talking to a tall, silver-haired man who looked vaguely familiar. Casey's heart stopped. The silver-haired man turned. It was Patrick O'Connor, the head of the Irish mob in Boston, and, though no one here knew it, Casey's biological uncle. Casey turned away sharply, her pulse hammering in her throat. What is he doing in Chicago? If he saw her, if he recognized her? "Casey, you okay?" Sienna asked, feeling Casey stiffen. "I'm fine," Casey choked out. "Just need some air. Stay with Dante. Do not move from his side." Casey pushed through the crowd, heading for the balcony. She needed to breathe. She needed to think. She had run from Boston 5 years ago to escape the O'Connor bloodline, to escape the destiny of being a mob wife or a bargaining chip. She burst onto the balcony, gulping in the cold Chicago air. "You look like you've seen a ghost," a voice said behind her. Casey spun around, her hand instinctively going to her thigh holster. It was Dante. He was leaning against the glass door, watching her. He held 2 glasses of champagne. "Just a headache," Casey said, forcing her hand to relax. "Liar." Dante walked over, handing her a glass. "You saw someone. Who was it? Rossini? Or the man he was with?" "I don't know who that was," Casey lied. "That was Patrick O'Connor," Dante said, stepping closer, boxing her in against the stone railing. "Boston Irish, brutal man. They say he killed his own brother for skimming off the top, and that his niece disappeared 5 years ago without a trace." Casey's blood ran cold. Dante was too smart. He was putting the pieces together. "Sounds like a charming family," Casey managed to say, taking a sip of the champagne to hide her trembling hands. "They are," Dante murmured. He reached out, his hand brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. His fingers lingered on her jawline. The touch was possessive, heated. "Casey, if you're in trouble, if you are running from something, tell me. I can protect you. But only if I know the truth." "I told you," Casey whispered, looking up into his dark, mesmerizing eyes. "I'm just a waitress." "No," Dante said, leaning down, his lips inches from hers. "You are trouble. And I think I'm starting to like trouble." He was going to kiss her. Casey could feel the gravity pulling them together, the undeniable magnetic force of 2 predators recognizing each other in the dark. She wanted him to kiss her. God, she wanted it. But before their lips could touch, the glass doors shattered inward. Gunfire erupted inside the museum. Screams tore through the gala. "Sienna!" Casey yelled, shoving Dante back. "Go!" Dante commanded, pulling his own weapon from his jacket. They ran back into the ballroom. It was a war zone. Men in ski masks were rappelling from the upper balcony. Smoke grenades hissed across the floor, and in the center of the chaos, 4 men were dragging a screaming Sienna towards the exit. "Not on my watch," Casey growled. She hitched up her dress, drew her Glock, and took a shooter's stance. This wasn't a waitress firing blindly. This was a soldier going to war. As Dante watched her double tap a masked man from 50 feet away, he knew one thing for certain. Casey Rhodes was the most dangerous woman he had ever met, and he was absolutely falling in love with her. The Great Hall of the Field Museum had transformed from a gala into a slaughterhouse. The echoing boom of gunfire bounced off the high ceilings, mixing with the terrified screams of Chicago's elite scrambling for the exits. Casey didn't scream. She moved. She kicked off her combat boots, abandoning them near the balcony doors to move silently in her stocking feet. The emerald silk dress was ruined, ripped up to her hip, but she didn't care. She held the Glock 43 with a 2-handed grip that was steady as stone. "Dante, flank left!" Casey barked the order without thinking. To his credit, the enforcer didn't argue. He saw the way she moved, low, tactical, checking corners, and realized she was the most qualified person in the room to lead this assault. He peeled off behind a massive display of a stuffed African elephant, drawing fire from 2 men on the mezzanine. Casey sprinted towards the center of the room. Sienna was being dragged by her hair across the polished floor by a man in a balaclava. She was kicking and screaming, one of her heels connecting with the kidnapper's shin. But he didn't stop. "Let her go!" Casey yelled, leveling her weapon. The man spun around, using Sienna as a human shield. He pressed a gun to her temple. Sienna froze, her eyes locking onto Casey's. The terror in them was absolute. "Drop it, sweetheart," the man shouted. His accent was thick. Boston, Southie. Casey's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew that accent. She knew the cadence. It was the voice of the men who used to guard her uncle's poker games. "You're making a mistake," Casey said, her voice eerily calm amidst the chaos. "You don't want to do this. Drop the gun, or I paint the floor with her brains." Casey calculated the shot. 30 feet, hostage moving slightly. Target area. The 3 inches of the man's forehead exposed above Sienna's shoulder. It was a sniper's shot with a subcompact pistol. Impossible for a waitress. Risky for a soldier. Necessary for family. "I said drop it!" The man roared, his finger tightening on the trigger. Casey exhaled. The world slowed down. The smoke, the noise, the screaming. It all faded into a grey blur. The only thing in focus was the front sight of her pistol. Crack! The shot was a dry snap. The man's head jerked back violently. A red mist sprayed the air behind him. He crumbled instantly, the gun falling from his dead hand. Sienna screamed as the body weight dragged her down, but she scrambled away, crawling through the blood. "Get up!" Casey was there in a second, hauling Sienna to her feet. "Don't look at him! Look at me!" Sienna was hyperventilating. You killed him! He was going to kill you. Move!" Casey dragged Sienna behind a granite pillar just as automatic fire chewed up the floor where they had been standing. "Pinned down!" Dante's voice came over the small earpiece he had tossed Casey earlier. "3 shooters at the north entrance. We can't go out the front. The loading dock," Casey said into the comms. "West wing. Through the Egyptian exhibit. It connects to the employee parking." "How do you know that?" Dante demanded, firing 2 suppressed shots in return. "I served tables here for a fundraiser last year," Casey lied smoothly. She actually knew it because she had cased every major building in the city for exits the week she arrived, a habit from a life on the run. "Go, I'll cover you," Dante ordered. "No," Casey said. She peered around the pillar. The shooters were advancing. "We move together. Leapfrog. I cover you, you move. You cover me, I move. On 3. Dante paused. He had led hit squads for 10 years. He had never taken orders from a woman in a ball gown. But as he watched Casey suppress the enemy position with 2 double taps that were professional grade, he realized he wasn't arguing with a waitress. He was arguing with a peer. Copy that. On 3. They moved like a single organism, a deadly dance of fire and maneuver. They pushed through the shadowed halls of the Egyptian exhibit, the ancient sarcophagi watching in silent judgment. At the loading dock, a black van was waiting. The engine was running. Casey didn't hesitate. She shot the driver through the side window before he could raise his weapon. She yanked the door open, pulled the body out, and shoved Sienna into the back seat. "Dante, drive!" Casey yelled, jumping into the passenger side. Dante slid behind the wheel, gunning the engine. The van squealed out of the dock, just as the heavy steel doors began to roll down, bullets sparking off the rear bumper. They tore onto Lakeshore Drive, weaving through traffic at 100 miles an hour. Dante was checking the mirrors constantly. "We're clear," he said after 10 minutes of silence. "No tail." The adrenaline crash hit the car like a physical weight. Sienna was sobbing quietly in the back. Casey stared at her hands. They were steady, but covered in gunpowder residue. Dante didn't drive back to the estate. He took the lower Wacker Drive, navigating the subterranean streets of Chicago until he pulled up to a nondescript industrial building in the loop. "Where are we?" Sienna asked, her voice trembling. "Safe house," Dante said. He turned off the engine and turned to look at Casey. The streetlights from above cast long shadows across his face. He looked at the blood on her dress, the gun still in her hand, and the cold, flat look in her eyes. "You made a 30-foot headshot with a compact pistol," Dante said softly. "Under fire." Casey holstered the weapon, her face a mask. "Lucky shot." "Bullshit," Dante said. "Who are you, Casey? And don't tell me you're a waitress. Waitresses don't clear rooms like Navy SEALs." "I'm the girl who just saved your boss's daughter," Casey said, opening the door. "You can thank me later. Right now, she needs ice and a stiff drink." The safe house was a converted loft on the top floor of an old garment factory. It was sparse, brick walls, leather furniture, a fully stocked bar, and a medical kit that looked like it belonged in a trauma center. Sienna had collapsed onto a sofa, clutching a blanket. She was in shock. Casey made her a cup of tea with heavy sugar for the adrenaline crash and sat with her until the shaking stopped. "Thank you," Sienna whispered, not looking up. I froze. I'm sorry." "You're not a soldier, Sienna," Casey said gently, brushing hair out of the girl's face. "You're not supposed to know how to handle that. It's okay to be scared." "You weren't scared," Sienna said, looking up with wide eyes. You were like a machine. Like Dante." Casey flinched. She stood up. "I'll go check the perimeter." She walked to the kitchen area, where Dante was leaning against the island, nursing a glass of bourbon. He had taken off his jacket and unbuttoned his collar. He watched her approach. "She's asleep," Casey said. "Good." Dante slid a glass toward her. "Drink." Casey took it. The bourbon burned, a welcome fire in her chest. "Sit up on the counter," Dante ordered. "Excuse me? Your leg, you're bleeding." Casey looked down. She hadn't noticed, but a shard of glass or a ricochet had sliced her thigh, right through the slit in the dress. Blood was drying on her skin. She sighed and hopped up onto the granite island. Dante moved between her legs, not sexually, but clinically. He opened a first aid kit. He poured antiseptic on a cotton pad. "This will sting," he murmured. He cleaned the wound with surprisingly gentle hands. Casey hissed, gripping the edge of the counter. Dante didn't look up, his focus entirely on the laceration. "Why are you helping us?" Dante asked quietly. "You could have run. In the confusion at the museum, you could have disappeared. You have skills. You could vanish." "I signed a contract," Casey said, watching his dark eyelashes against his cheek. "Contracts don't mean anything when bullets start flying." Dante applied a butterfly bandage. His hands rested on her thigh, warm and rough. He looked up, locking eyes with her. The distance between them was negligible. The air suddenly felt thick, charged with the same electricity that had been on the balcony. "I don't run," Casey whispered. "Not anymore." "Who were you running from before?" Dante pressed. "The Irish?" That shooter, he had a Boston accent. You recognized it. I saw you hesitate. Casey's heart skipped a beat. He was too observant. I grew up in Southie, she admitted. A half-truth. You hear an accent like that, you know trouble is coming. The Irish mobs are vicious. So is the outfit, Dante said. His thumb traced a small circle on her skin, just above the bandage. But we protect our own. Am I your own? Casey asked, her breath hitching. Dante's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The intensity was suffocating. You're living in my house. You saved Sienna. You bleed for us. Yeah. You're ours now. He leaned in. This time there was no glass door to shatter, no gunfire to interrupt. Dante kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming. It tasted of bourbon and danger. His hand moved to the back of her neck, tangling in her hair, pulling her closer. Casey gasped, her hands gripping his shirt, pulling him in. For a moment she forgot the lies, the O'Connors, and the hit on her head. There was just Dante. He pulled back slowly, resting his forehead against hers. They were both breathing hard. If you are lying to me, Dante whispered against her lips, if you are a plant, it will kill me to put you down, Casey. But I will do it. I'm not a plant, Casey said, her voice shaking. I'm just complicated. I like complicated, Dante murmured. A harsh, buzzing sound broke the moment. Dante pulled away, frustration flashing across his face. He pulled his phone from his pocket. It's Salvatore, he said. His face hardened, the lover vanishing, the enforcer returning. Yes, Don Moretti. We are secure. No, she's fine. What? Dante's face went pale. He looked at Casey, his eyes widening in shock. Are you sure? Dante asked into the phone. Send me the picture. He hung up. He looked at Casey with a new expression. Not suspicion. Not lust. Horror. What? Casey asked, sliding off the counter. What happened? Salvatore had his men toss the apartment of the shooter you killed, Dante said, his voice hollow. They found a dossier, a target list. And? Sienna wasn't the primary target, Dante said. He turned the phone screen toward her. On the screen was a grainy surveillance photo. It wasn't of Sienna. It was of Casey, taken 3 days ago at the restaurant, and under it, typed in bold letters, Target, Kathleen O'Connor, alive preferred, dead acceptable. The silence in the loft was deafening. The truth was out. Kathleen, Dante said the name like a curse. Patrick O'Connor's missing niece, the heiress to the Irish syndicate. Casey backed away, her hand going to the gun on the counter. But Dante was faster. He already had his weapon drawn, leveled at her chest. Dante, listen to me. You're not a waitress, Dante spat, the betrayal in his eyes cutting deeper than any knife. You're royalty. You're the enemy. I am not the enemy, Casey yelled. I ran away from them. I hate them. Why do you think they have a hit out on me? Or maybe you're here to infiltrate, Dante countered, his finger tightening on the trigger. Maybe this whole saving Sienna act was just to get close to Salvatore, to get close to me. I saved her life, Casey screamed, tears stinging her eyes. I killed my own people to save her. Doesn't that prove anything? In this life, Dante's voice cracked, it proves you're a good actor. The door to the bedroom creaked open. Sienna stood there, wrapped in a blanket, looking between Dante's gun and Casey's tear-streaked face. Dante, put the gun down, Sienna said, her voice trembling but firm. Go back to bed, Sienna, Dante warned. She's an O'Connor. I don't care if she's the devil, Sienna said, stepping in front of Casey. She shielded Casey with her own body. She took a bullet for me. She saved me when you weren't there. If you want to shoot her, you shoot me first. Dante froze. The standoff hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Move, Sienna, Dante growled. No. Sienna glared at him, channeling every ounce of her father's stubbornness. She stays, or I walk out that door and let the Irish take me. Dante lowered the gun slowly, running a hand over his face. He looked at Casey, the hurt and confusion warring with the duty he owed his Don. "You have until morning," Dante said, his voice cold as ice. "Explain everything. Why you ran, why they want you dead. And if I catch you in one single lie, I won't need a dossier to tell me what to do." Dante turned and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. Casey sank onto the sofa, her legs giving out. Sienna sat beside her, grabbing her hand. "You better start talking," Sienna whispered, "because he really liked you. And now he wants to kill you. That's a bad combination." Casey looked at Dante's rigid back. She knew the next few hours would determine if she lived or died. It was time to tell the story of the Boston massacre, the night she fled, and the reason Patrick O'Connor would burn Chicago to the ground to get her back. "I didn't run because I was bored," Casey began, her voice trembling as she stared down the barrel of Dante's gun. "I ran because I was the only one in the room when Patrick O'Connor put a bullet in my father's head." Dante's eyes narrowed, but he didn't lower the weapon. "Your father died of a heart attack. That was the official report." "My uncle owns the coroner," Casey spat. "I was 16. I was hiding in the study. Patrick wanted the territory, and my dad wouldn't sell drugs to kids. So Patrick removed the obstacle. I saw it all. I have the ledger, the one proving Patrick was skimming from the 5 families to fund a coup. That's why he wants me dead, Dante. Not because I'm family. Because I'm the evidence." Sienna gasped, clutching Casey's arm tighter. "She's telling the truth, Dante. Look at her." Dante hesitated. The raw pain in Casey's eyes was something no spy could fake. He slowly lowered the gun. "If you have that ledger," Dante said, his voice dropping to a growl, "why didn't you use it?" "Because I just wanted to live," Casey cried. "I didn't want a war. I just wanted to be Casey Rhodes, the waitress who didn't have to look over her shoulder every 10 seconds. Before Dante could respond, the window behind him shattered. A canister hissed across the floor. Tear gas. "Down!" Dante roared, tackling Sienna behind the heavy oak bar. Casey didn't hide. She dove for the kitchen island, sliding across the floor to grab her fallen Glock. The door to the loft was kicked in, and 4 men in tactical gear stormed the room. They weren't low-level thugs. These were O'Connor's elite hit squad. "Find the girl! Kill the rest!" a voice shouted. Chaos erupted. Dante popped up, firing with lethal precision, taking down the lead breacher. But he was pinned down by suppressing fire from the hallway. "Sienna, stay down!" Dante yelled. Casey saw an angle. She didn't think about self-preservation. She thought about the man she was falling in love with. She vaulted over the kitchen island, drawing the fire of the 2 gunmen on the left. "Hey, boys," she screamed. "Miss me?" They turned their weapons on her. It was a suicide move, but it bought Dante the split second he needed. He rose, double-tapping both targets before they could pull their triggers on Casey. The last man, the squad leader, lunged at Casey with a knife, knocking the gun from her hand. They crashed into the coffee table. He was heavy, smelling of stale tobacco and bloodlust. He pinned her down, raising the blade. "Patrick sends his regards, Kathleen," he sneered. Bang! The man's eyes went wide. He slumped forward, dead weight on top of her. Standing behind him was Sienna Moretti, holding Dante's backup piece with 2 shaking hands. She looked terrified, but her jaw was set in stone. "Her name," Sienna said, her voice cracking, "is Casey." Dante pulled the body off Casey and hauled her to his feet. He looked at Sienna with a mixture of shock and immense pride. Then he looked at Casey. He pulled her into a crushing embrace, burying his face in her neck. "I believe you," Dante whispered into her hair. "I'm sorry." The sound of sirens and the distinct roar of Moretti reinforcements filled the street below. Salvatore had arrived. Later that night, the living room of the Moretti estate was quiet. Salvatore sat behind his desk, reading the battered ledger Casey had retrieved from her hidden safety deposit box. He closed the book. He looked at Casey, who was cleaned up, her wounds bandaged, sitting next to Dante. "With this," Salvatore said, tapping the leather cover, Patrick O'Connor is a dead man walking. The commission will sanction a hit by morning. You have given us Chicago, my dear." "I don't want Chicago," Casey said, leaning her head on Dante's shoulder. "I just want to stop running." Salvatore smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "Then stop. The O'Connors are finished. And as for you, Sienna tells me you saved her life twice tonight. You are not a waitress anymore, Casey." "No," Dante said, interlacing his fingers with hers and lifting her hand to kiss her knuckles. "She's family, and she's mine." Casey looked at the man who had threatened to kill her hours ago, seeing only devotion in his dark eyes. She smiled, the first true smile she had worn in 5 years. "Yours?" she agreed. "But I'm still not wearing heels to the wedding." Dante laughed, and soft, the sound rich and promising. "Deal." What a ride. From a waitress dodging plates to a mafia queen dodging bullets, Casey Rhodes proved that royalty isn't about bloodline. It's about loyalty and courage. She didn't just handle the mafia boss's daughter. She saved her soul and captured the heart of the city's most dangerous enforcer. The O'Connors are history. Sienna has found a sister she never knew she needed, and Dante Vespere finally found the one woman wild enough to tame him. It turns out the Sapphire Supper Club lost a waitress, but the Moretti family gained a warrior. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of romance and action, smash that like button. Did you see that twist coming about her uncle? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. We have a brand new story coming next week involving a billionaire CEO and a secret baby you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching.